Hey guys, welcome back to the SkillBridge Network. We are going to be doing a couple of different things today. First, we're going to be talking about a gap calculator, which is for you to estimate how much money you need once you get out of the military. Then a little bit later, we're going to show you how to use LinkedIn effectively to get your job as you're transitioning out of the military. In order to do all this, I've invited my really good friend, retired out of the Army, really helped me become who I am on LinkedIn. Has just been a great friend and a great mentor. Eric Horton, the transition hacker, is his name on social media. Eric, come on in. Thank you so much for taking your time to help us out today.
Hey, absolutely, John, and thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we share screen, kind of give us the 20,000 foot view of why you created the gap calculator and what it actually is.
So that's a good question, man, and really thank you for helping me talk about the platform, the benefits of LinkedIn, as well as the reasoning for the reason why I created the gap calculator. So the big reason ultimately that I created the gap calculator was because, like myself, like many others, right? Anybody that does over 2 decades of service, we have a certain expectation of what our worth is tied to, as far as a salary that defines our worth, right? And so a lot of times what I'd noticed really early on was we rush to make a decision with a salary without understanding what does that mean? What is it going to come from? And what is that toll going to be on us, right? So and in short, it was like, man, you really want a six-figure salary, but do you really understand the
Yeah.
commitment of what that six-figure salary is going to ask from you, right? And then the other part of it is we're so misunderstood in, hey, I'm retiring from Fort Campbell. I'm going to live in Clarksville and I'm retiring, with 27 years as a sergeant major. Like I have to replace that $108,000 salary a year. And the reality of it is you really don't. And then the other reality is it won't happen as easily as you think it could happen,
Yeah.
because location dictates salaries, not you from the military in a location.
Right.
And that's what kind of catches everybody in the crosshairs at Fort Campbell. Is you have such a massive military population that retires and stays in Clarksville, but the reason for businesses to move into the area was because of low to no skill, not because of Fort Campbell. And it pulls from southern Kentucky, southwestern Kentucky, northwestern Tennessee. They call it northern middle, but the reason for that was every time a third party contractor or consultant comes in and they set local wages for those businesses, that it doesn't take into consideration the high salaries that military are coming out with. And so they set those salaries, and that confuses us because then we're saying, what do you mean I can't find a salary that replaces my income? And that was a piece that, I was, when I retired, and all my peers, we were so dead set on trying to find a job that paid that replacement salary that we were willing to commute to Nashville. And that was where everything for me was like an aha moment. Was like, oh man, it's an hour and a seven, hour and 10 minute drive on a good day, 3 hours on a bad day, one way,
Yep.
just to go find that $100,000 salary because I couldn't find one in Clarksville. And so that gap calculator was, I was like, man, I really didn't need to. And when I say that I didn't need to, doesn't mean I'm not worth it. It just meant that I didn't need to, because between my pension, my VA compensation, and all that, my gap was very small compared to what I thought. And so I created that gap calculator to give people some kind of somewhat of a pause and a peace of mind to say, whew, I don't need to go and try to find that job to replace it. I might be able to find a job local that will exceed
Right.
that gap and basically be a pay raise from retiring.
Yeah.
And so that was the reason why I created it.
Well, and one of the things that I've heard you say before too is the gap calculator is not meant to tell you to take less money from a position because your qualities and your qualifications are what they are. The gap calculator is more to help you make a decision based on your other income streams on whether you should take this job. Because we don't want to negotiate with companies because, oh, well, I have VA coming in, or, oh, well, I have disability coming in.
Absolutely. And that was something that I really kind of, there was two sides to that coin. One was obviously don't undersell your capabilities, but at some point you also have to understand the local realities of a wage, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't try for it. It doesn't mean you're not worth it. It just means, there may be a tactical pause that you can kind of reassess your needs based, because it is very personalized. It's very dependent on the person, right? Yeah, so I definitely do not want people to undersell themselves for sure,
Yeah,
in any capacity, because capitalism will exploit that, right? So
absolutely. you know, well, and it's conversation for another day. Where
yeah,
capitalism can serve you in this manner is if you are retired or 100% PNT, you can, instead of having the company pay your insurance, have them pay you instead. So there's a way to
yeah,
manipulate it on your behalf. So why don't you go ahead and share screen, show us what this looks like, and talk us through this.
yep. So here we go, and we're going to. All right. Let me know when you see the screen here.
Yep. It'll be on a little bit delay because we're recording and sharing
Yep.
screen. So here we go. It's up.
All right. So this is what I kind of wanted you to take a look at, right? And so I actually, and you have the link if I'm not mistaken. I do this every single year where I update it with the new pay scale, I update it with the new VA compensation rates, and then I update it with the current tax rates as well, right? I'm not a CPA, so I don't do financial advising. I'm not any kind of representation like that, but the realities are we know what DoD pays and we know what VA pays, right? So those compensations are factual. I didn't make these up, right? And
Yep.
so this is the visual representation of what I kind of prepared. So that way people can look at it and say, I'm retiring as a 30-year command sergeant major, and I did all pay grades. So that link actually has my Google folder that has all the ranks in it, right? And it's easy for somebody to download and then put your own information into it. And I'll walk through some of that. But this visual representation is a culmination of all of the data that goes into the from the worksheet, right? Which is right here. And in this worksheet, this is exactly how I fill this information out. And we're going to go to I'll show you the actual links because I go to, what is the BAH link? Because again, DOD is factual. So what is the BAH for your zip code? You can input all this information in here. And it's very easy step by step. Each one of these blocks has a little arrow that you can follow over onto what you need to do for your location. And then the other part of it is we know what BAS you get. We know what the active tax rates are. And I have the websites for those as well. And so what happens is when you look at the high three, these numbers are not something that we just randomly select. They're actually factual based off of the DFAS MyPay rates every single year, right? So next year, or 2025, this year actually, at 30 years, this is exactly what a 30-year command sergeant major makes, right?
Yep.
These, and then once you go over here, these rates are actually in 2025 what the VA compensation calculations are.
Okay.
And so you can do the drop downs and you choose, all these different inputs that are specific to your situation. And then at the end of the day, this is what generates what your monthly paycheck is. But all this calculations are based off the facts from what DFAS says, right?
Okay.
So once you input all of that personal information into under your situation, then it generates this right here. And so this is what I wanted people to kind of take a look at, right? So, and I initially started calling it the financial fiscal cliff because I was like, holy crap, like, do you know what's going to take place the very next month of your first retirement paycheck? That's going to be a huge steep drop off from what you were getting before on active duty and then what you're going to get after active duty. Now, this is from an annual perspective. So, from an annual perspective, it tells you what that gap looks like, right? So, if you're coming out 30 years as a sergeant major, this is exactly with all your BAH, BAS, what your taxable compensation is based off of your base pay, not your entitlements. But I did that to show you also like these are some big numbers, right?
Yep.
So the stress level comes from I need to replace this $147,000. when the actuality is I just need to find a job that pays $69,000.
Right. Well, one
And
thing
then
too that I love that you did here, because we do this in Sales Platoon, is people don't factor in, and I don't know if you did it in your calculator, but a BAH SSR major, he's getting 30 grand a year. That's actually not 30 grand because that's not taxable. That's actually closer to 40 grand because
and
it's
I
not
did.
taxable.
Yes, absolutely. So the only thing, and that goes into this worksheet. So when I put retirement tax or active tax and retirement tax, that is only based on your base pay. The only thing that's taxable by federal standards is your base pay. Nothing else is taxable.
Right?
So that's the piece that a lot of us don't really pay attention to. And there's a second and third order of effect from this calculator because then once you do find a job, let's say that pays you that replacement salary, well, by federal tax withholdings, and now you're going to jump up possibly two and three different. It's a sliding
Absolutely.
scale on the IRS, so you could definitely go from like a 20% tax rate to a 24% tax rate and or higher depending upon the situation. And that's something that we don't even calculate from too. So it sounds great that you're going to find a job to replace this $147,000, but if you add that $147,000 and the 62,000, well, you can see quickly how that is going to exceed possible liabilities in tax situations, right? So
Right.
I don't, again, I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a tax accountant or anything like that. I just know from my situation, I was stressing that I needed to replace that total ultimate income, right? And so, and the reality of it was, I really just needed to find a job that paid this. And I looked at that and I said, man, I was so stressed because I was driving, an hour and 5 minutes on a good day to 3 hours one way on a bad day. And so every single day, I was spending, between five or well, really between 10 and 24 plus hours a week just on driving to and from Nashville. And I originally had sold that to myself that, hey, I'm just going to use that hour to drive and get ready for work mentally, right? And I'm going to use the hour on the way home to decompress from the workday. But the reality of it also, in a corporate environment, they don't expect you to put in your 8 to 5 or 8 to 4:30 and you get to go home, right? So nobody's going to pay you a six-figure salary and not own you for a six-figure salary. And so that mental stress from not just the work environment, I-24, I've seen more cars on the side of the road in flames on I-24 than I ever did in a convoy in Iraq or Afghanistan, right?
Right.
And that piece was, I just didn't know that terrain, right?
Right.
And so the reality of it was, can I look at this reasonably and say in Clarksville, could I have found a job paying $69,000? That's still kind of high for the area, right? And so I became more aware of this because when I retired, I ended up going to work as a director of veteran services for the state of Tennessee in the Department of Labor. So I really got to understand how wages are set and what do companies pay. And the average salary in the state of Tennessee is $39,000 a year. The average salary in Clarksville on average is about 52 to $55,000 a year, right? So that's huge. If you say that the average salary of a population of 200 plus thousand people is $52,000, that's going to be a stretch to find a job that pays that in Clarksville, right?
Yep.
It's going to be kind of like winning the lottery, to be honest.
Yep.
Operations managers on average are about $65,000 in Montgomery County. And I get all this information from ECD's data, Department of Labor's data, and then MTSU puts together a wage survey every single year, going through chambers to get these average wages as well. Because I figured I'd have to tell soldiers also, like, I know what your position said you were doing, I know what your rank said you were earning, but I have to be able to articulate to you what the environment of your salaries is going to look like in reality in the zip code that you live in, because that's how salaries are set, not because Eric wants you to get a better job from your recognition of your service, right?
Yep.
Um, and so, again, going back to the calculator, then I was starting to say, hey, well, if they get a 50% VA rating, Well, now their gap's going to go from a $69,000 to a $49,000. So now if I find a job that pays me 55 or 60, well, I just retired from service and basically got a promotion.
Yep.
And so I'm not saying you shouldn't shoot for the highest as you can, but you need to at least know the battlefield and the terrain that you're going to be
Well,
walking
and you got to
into.
be realistic. So, because of some of the units like 5th Group and 160th, those guys coming out of the military have a much higher degree of competency, right? So
Absolutely.
where are you going to get a job that can actually utilize all the skill sets that you have in Clarksville that's going to pay you anything close? And the answer is really none.
Right.
And so you really
Absolutely.
do have to, and I'm sure it's the same at Fort Bragg because Fayetteville probably does not have a great, market for, $100,000 jobs. And I'm sure,
Right.
Fort Cavavos is the same, right? Now you go to
Right.
Austin or you go to San Antonio, or in North Carolina, you go to
Ash.
Raleigh. I'm
Right.
sure that that's different. But again, you're doing hour there, hour and a half commute, 2 hours every day,
Right. At a
so
minimum.
at a minimum.
Yeah. And that's the other, huge misconception too, right? Is most businesses, most contracted companies that bid for contracts, I'll use Fort Campbell as an example of that. Most contractors, they already build in a calculation that assumes you're going to get a retirement anyway.
Yep.
And so because of that, their wages are superficially really low because they already know that, hey, you're retired, man. We're going to give you a little, we're going to have you do the same job that you were doing before, but we're going to pay you, enough to be, let's say $5,000 over this gap, right? And so that's where a lot of people don't really understand that, yeah, your salary is this, but they're not counting on the salary of what you were earning before. They're going to really give you a decrease. And I'll tell you one good example of that is the JROTC, SROTC positions that are contracted, because that's a scale that where every time you get a DFAS promotion, or I'm sorry, you get your retirement paycheck gets that promotion, that annual cost of living adjustment, right? Then what happens is they still keep your salary at the same. So as your cost of living increases, then what happens is it pushes down the salary that they're going to pay you. So they're actually, which is kind of crazy because they're actually decreasing your pay because you're getting an increase in your retirement pension.
Right.
And a lot of people, but the way they're looking at it is I'm just staying flatlined on my earnings, and they're like, I just didn't want to take a pay cut. But it's like, man, you're doing yourself such a disservice because you're not going anywhere growth wise. And to be honest, the company is paying you less every single year that you get a pay raise because their contractual obligation is to keep you here, right? An E9 at 22 years, 24 years, whatever the case may be. Those JROTC and SROTC positions, they actually pay you less every year, which is like, wow, did anybody really talk about that enough, right?
Nobody.
Because we're so set on, I just need to replace this income and I'm okay. I just want to replace the income. That's kind of generally the consensus. And then the other part of it is, I'm worth this. You will pay me this. And then the harsh reality is, I can't find a job that pays me this, so I'm not worth this
Yep.
unless I drive to Nashville. And that's like, no, man, let's really help you figure out a mindset that's going to give you peace during your transition, that can help you kind of, oh, I can take a tactical pause. I don't need to rush into a failure, right? And then another part, I really, Colonel Rob Campbell was my old commander, and he had wrote a book about this. And he said, why do we rush to compromise the very values in which we fought to serve? Right. And rushing to compromise is, why are we compromising our values for a number that sets our perceived worth? And that's literally the way that I interpreted that to be. And so, yeah, man, I just wanted to try to create a tool to help us get a better mindset and then understand the reality of the battlefield we're transitioning into. And then just kind of go from there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I think that, this is so important. And you and I both having been in this transition space. The other thing is that you need to be looking at this in consideration so that you're not job hopping every year trying to make up for something that you actually don't even need. I mean, maybe you do, but in
Right.
just speaking about it from, because what we see is a lot of job hopping to the next greenest pasture. And it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
work out that way.
And you're exactly right, man. And so here's another understanding the way that we're calling it job hopping, but on average, and again, this is from the information that I learned after working for Department of Labor for about 4.5 years, 5 years, was that people on average in the civilian sector they change jobs every 4.2 years. And generally, that's because they change jobs to, in what I call, I'm putting it in our language, they PCS for a promotion.
Um,
And so if you look at that and you say every 4.2 years, a person PCS is for a promotion, that means the equivalent of I'm an E5, I need to make E6. And so the only other position that's going to be an E6, or I might need to go from an E6 to an E7, I need to become a platoon sergeant, right? Well, there's only so many units that have a need for a platoon sergeant. And so I have to be willing to leave the battalion or brigade to go find a platoon sergeant job in a different battalion or, internally or whatever the case may be. The same as if I'm going to be a first sergeant, right? There's only so many first sergeant positions available. I have to be willing to PCS for that different promotion, right? And so when I looked at that on that, I was like, oh man, well, that's the same thing that the military does for us, right? They don't want us staying in one location for too long. And now SOF is a little bit different, but they generally don't want us staying in one location for too long because we don't get the depth and diversity of our experience and leadership exposure. And so, or become complacent, right? So the military does a good job of moving you around for different job promotions. And the exact same thing happens in the civilian sector. But it's when your driving motivator is, I need to earn income and I'm going to look for the greener pastures or the perceived greener pastures. Then when I leave a job to take a job that gives me a promotion, again, what stress level does it come with, right? And what are some of these other tangible questions that I should be asking
Yep,
at the corporate level? What are your expectations for me to take this $30,000 promotion?
yep,
Is it, and that was something that was very foreign to me as well, right? Like, what does that salary look like? And what is that commitment? And what I thought my mindset was, oh, it's just, leading from a leadership position means that I could pretty much just tell everybody what to do. And then I'm going to go home at a certain hour, right? In the civilian sector, for me, it turned into a 6-day work week. And I was like, wow, that was not what I was expecting. But that's where I learned the harsh reality that if you ask a company to replace this income, you better, damn well be understanding of what that ask of them is of you. That, it's not going to come with, you're not going to, come in whenever you want to, go home whenever you want to, leave when you want to.
yep.
You're not going to get 30 days of vacation time a year, all these different things, and it's
Yep.
just a different environment, man.
Well, I think that's one of the bigger shocks is people don't realize how much time they get off in the military.
Oh, absolutely. Every month there's a 4-day weekend or a 3-day,
Yeah,
weekend.
right. And you're not
Um,
getting that.
and you're, not in the civilian sector, right?
Yep, yep,
So I'm gonna go over and then show you the websites that I use just so people understand what feeds into this information, right? So as we start to kind of go into that, the first thing I do is I'll go over to the pay chart and then I pull out what is, at that current year, what my pay grade is, just so you see that my numbers are factual, right? That's what the 2025 pay chart is for a 30-year command sergeant major. When it comes over to the BAH, that's easy. I just go right here, type in my zip code, this year 2025. I hit submit. It gives me my hard number right here, which is exactly what you get right there, BAH.
yep.
Then I go back over and I pull my BAS. Same thing. That's what it is for senior enlisted. And again, I did all this hard work for you in the folder because it actually has it has every pay grade, and you just need to go and get all. And I even have I downloaded the pay scales because it's a PDF, and I put them in there so you don't have to go to the websites. But I put all the links to where I pulled all the data from. So step by step, each one that you want to go to. Once you fill in all this, it automatically tabulates this. And then the drop downs here already have the calculators based off of the high three, years of service built into it as well. So, um, and just to it's just a really easy thought part of your personal situation, right? So when you retire, like how many kids are you married, under 18, over 18, all that information these are all drop down. You can select and choose what you need to. And then the other part of this was I wanted people to really understand also, you're retired, your monthly paycheck, your retired paycheck is going to be, this. So you're going from a $9,000 a month active duty paycheck down to a $6,000 retired paycheck. And that's not including the tax aspect of it because we had to take the taxes out of this as well, right? And so when you started looking at that, the other part of that is it's a mandatory 6.5% contribution of what they call the SBP or the Survivor Benefit Plan, which is essentially like a life insurance plan, right? And this is actually a very good conversation as well. So by the time that you factor in your retirement paycheck is actually going to be that's 6140. By the time you take out all the taxes and on your retirement side of the house and that 6.5% SBP, your monthly take home is going to be 4848. That's a far cry from the $9,000 you were getting before just in base
Yeah.
pay alone. And so this is what I wanted people to really take a look at. Like, do I need to take the SBP? Can I find a better policy out there and save myself the $4,800 a month? And that goes into that gap calculator as well. So when you look at all these different, the blue part is the SBP contribution. So I kind of wanted people to see what that is. These are the taxes. These are the VA non-taxable, and the green is the active duty pay. So it's a very easy worksheet for you to fill out that paints that gap, that where you can look at this and say, whew, can I find a job that pays these gaps, right?
Yep.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't shoot higher. It just means your peace of mind will come a lot easier for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it should help alleviate some of that anxiety that we get through that transition.
100%. Absolutely. Because what I've seen a lot of times too is, man, people are so stressed about that number. They are not listening to anything of what the job expectations. Can they even do the job?
Right.
And then, all these different things as well. And then they rush into just accepting the very first job that gives them an offer. Because again, it's a process.
Well,
And
we've
in
seen
them,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And when they accept the very first job out of like, oh God, I don't have any offers on the table but this one, and then you just accept that just because you're fear,
Yep.
then that's counter to everything that you've been taught in the military,
That's
right?
right.
You do not make fearful decisions. And so that's the piece that I just really wanted to kind of harp on, that this is all about alleviating the anxiety of chasing a number, right? So
Right. Right. All righty, man. Well, thank you so much for your time and taking some time to show us this in the process of transitioning to find a new job. Appreciate that. And then send me the link, and then I'll post it with the video when it goes live.
absolutely.
All righty, buddy.
All right,
Thanks.
thanks, John.